Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Planning Committee. We will let me get my head.
So we go.
Yeah. So apologies first. Yeah. I've got two apologies for absence today, and that's for Teresa Arnold and for Andy Nash. So the next item 2, will be minutes of the previous meeting held on the 17th of July 2026, and that's on pages 5 to 12. And I think Ginny has one or two corrections to make.
Next, it's a correction, Chairman. The bottom of page 9, where it says B. Hanley stated one of the parish councils, it just doesn't read right. It was B. Hanley abstained, as he was one of the parish councils for Hathersage Parish.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is.
And on page 7, 75/26, referencing the barn has been identified as a non-designated heritage. I think the next word should be asset on that, but that's a minor thing. Apart from that, is everyone happy with the minutes? Yeah, we can agree them as a correct record? Thank you. Let's move on then to... Is that better? Can you hear me now, Kath?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do my best to speak up. Next item, urgent business. We have no urgent business. Item 4, public participation. To note any questions or receive any statements, representations, and the rest of those. And we do not have any today, but we do have members of the public who will be speaking to, I think, almost every item that we have from planning applications today. So those will come up in due course. So we move...
Chair, could I declare that I know Mrs. Twigg? In fact, she was a councillor on here 30 years ago when I first joined. So I know her pretty well. Thank you.
And
I'll go out when that agenda item is on.
So she's declaring an interest
Yes.
for this one.
Yeah, it's a non-pecuniary interest,
Yeah.
but you're going to absent yourself during that. But I do think that there are a few other members here who may have known Judith Twigg in the past. In fact, she greeted me when I arrived back in 2018. So it's good to see you've come back today. Okay, so we will move on to that very item 6, Kath. Oh, sorry, Patrick. Yeah.
Apart from knowing Mrs. Twigg, Chairman, I'm acquainted with, but have not in any way talked to them or been involved with Hugh Wright, Paul Downing and Linda Granger on the 3 items on the list. I've known them all in the context of the Parishes Forum. And in relation to the Old Hall Creamery, after we refused it last time, I did receive a letter from the applicant really wondering what he'd done wrong, as it were. I gave him an appropriately bland reply, but beyond that, no further discussion. But in no case have I discussed any of those applications with the individuals concerned.
And these are not prejudicial interests. Yeah. Okay. That's duly noted. Oh, Martin.
I also declare, it should declare that I know Paul Downing and Linda Granger through the Parishes Forum.
In the same manner as Patrick then. Yeah. Okay, so should we move now to Item 6 on page 13 of your reports, full application for change of use of former care facility to form 7 dwellings, including demolition of the central communal block, external alterations. This is all at all these works are at Gurnon Manor House at Dagnall Gardens, Bakewell. And I'll let Andrea introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Am I on? Thank you, Chair. You've turned me off again. Morning, members. The application site is Gurnon Manor House, which is to the south of the centre of Bakewell. And obviously you can see the site area edged red on the plan. Access is gained from Dagnall Gardens here, which itself comes off the A6. It's kind of just opposite the Co-op petrol station, if you can think where that is. To the south of Dagnall Gardens, there's also another parallel cul-de-sac known as the Avenue, which is a private road. The land-edged blue is the woodland to the west of the site, which is also in the applicant's ownership, but there's no development proposed in that area. So there are residential properties in close proximity to the site. There are some sheltered flats here at Hoyle Court. There's the large house, Dagnall House, which we saw on the site yesterday, a pair of semi-detached properties here. And then there are obviously the residential properties on Dagnall Gardens and on the Avenue. So as you can see, the access is to the east. This is the main access here into the site. And then there's another access that branches off north and gives access to further parking spaces here on the north side. The building was a residential home for 36 people that was owned by Derbyshire County Council. It was built in the late 1970s following consent in 1977. It was closed down in 2022 and sold on by auction by the County Council. So the area edge green on this slide is the Bakewell Conservation Area. So you can see that the boundary just tracks along that southern boundary of the application site and then along the eastern boundary here. So Dagnall Gardens and the Avenue aren't in the conservation area, but Dagnall House and the application site and the land to the north is. The building as it stands at present doesn't contribute to the character of the conservation area, but it's not particularly prominent in any important views either. So this is a slide, an aerial photograph that shows the site in 2022, just before closure. So you can see there are 4 detached blocks of accommodation here. That they were the bedrooms to the nursing homes, and they were linked to this sort of central communal area here, linked by several flat-roofed elements. You can see there are several trees on the application site. And just to say, we do have John Coe, our tree conservation officer, here in the room, if the members have any particular technical questions. This is another aerial photograph that shows the site currently. So in 2024, some demolition took place to some parts of the building. So the roof of this central block here was removed and some of the linking structures, and the building was stripped out, and some internal reconfiguration within the buildings also took place. In 2024, just after these works took place, a planning application was submitted for 7 open market dwellings, and that was refused at committee due to a lack of affordable housing and the lack of a flood risk assessment, tree survey and protected species survey. So this is a resubmission that aims to address those previous reasons for refusal. The proposals are now to convert to 7 dwellings in total again. This time it's for 5 open market dwellings and 2 affordable dwellings for local needs. So just a few photographs. This is looking west towards the site along Dagnall Close. You can see here the large western red cedar, which we saw on site yesterday, that will be retained. And there are 4 trees to be removed altogether, most of which you can see. I think you can see them all actually on this slide. This is the goat willow here, and then there's these 3 trees here, the red plum here, and then another one here which you can see is leaning, and a spruce here. They are all in very poor condition, hence they're going to be removed. So this is the entrance to the site. You can see the flat-roofed section here, and the central block, which would be removed. You can also see this area here, which is going to be, I'll show you later on the other slides, but this is going to be the garden to one of the affordable local needs dwellings. One of the conditions that we've recommended is that this be bounded by a dry stone wall to achieve some enhancement to the conservation area. The applicant would prefer that to be a native hedgerow or the close bordered fence that is actually proposed. We don't think a close bordered fence is appropriate in this location. So this is another view looking south. You can see Dagnall House here, and these are 2 of the residential blocks. This is the one that will be the detached unit. And this is the area we couldn't get access to yesterday for health and safety reasons, but you can see this is where the roof was that's been removed within that central block. And again, you can see Dagnall House there in the background. Oh, this is looking south along the western boundary, so this is one of the trees, the goat willow, that would be removed due to its proximity to one of the blocks, and also the proximity to the neighbour's property. And again, this is a view of the central block, which would be removed. This is a view from the avenue this is the south boundary of the site. This is around about 5 metre high yew and holly hedge. There is a pedestrian gateway existing here onto the avenue. So this is the avenue, and there is another one that's actually just off the slide up here. So this is a roof plan of the development as proposed. So the proposal is for 7 houses. There would be 2 pairs of semi-detached open market houses here, a pair of semi-detached affordable local needs houses here, and a detached dwelling here. So that central section that we saw on the plans before would be removed, and that would create parking in the centre, and there would be additional parking here, 4 spaces to the north side. We can see on here the trees that would be removed. There's the 3 at the entrance to the site, and the goat willow here. And this is the yew hedge along the southern boundary, which would be retained and reduced in a 3-year phasing to a height of 3 metres. So just moving on to the floor plans, the pink area again shows that central area. These are the affordables. One would be a 2-bed and one would be a 3-bed. That's the detached open market, and these are the semi-detached open market dwellings. You can see here the pedestrian access marked on. If you can just see that there. That would be retained, and the other one is here where those set of steps are. So this is a floor plan of one of the affordable units. So we have a subdivision along the long axis of the building here. So that is the subdivision there. So this is one property, which is a 3-bed. And that is the other property, which is the 2-bed. This is the 3-bed detached unit, 7. And then this is just one of the 2 sets of semis. The other block's almost the same. So again, you can see that subdivision. So they are being subdivided along the long axis of the building here in this kind of east-west axis. And that results in the properties being largely single aspect. So they have one has bedrooms largely facing north and the lounge, and the other has bedrooms and lounge largely facing south. Although each property does actually have a kitchen window facing to the side. It's not ideal, this layout, as generally it is more pleasant to have more than one aspect. And negotiations did take place with regard to this, but the applicants wish the decision to be as submitted. I think there would be some loss of light as a result of this layout, but generally this is a pleasant open location with good amenity in other respects. So we felt that the benefits of regenerating this brownfield site would outweigh this minor constraint. So I'm not going to show all of the elevations because there are a lot. So I'm just going to show you the most important ones, which are those facing the sort of perimeter of the site. Also, there's very little change proposed to the buildings other than storm canopies on some of the doorways, as you can see on this one here, and some minor areas of timber cladding. So this is looking, these are the north elevations facing towards Hoyle Court. So this was the detached unit, and this is the affordable local needs. This one is looking east towards Dagnall Gardens, and again, as you can see, there's very little change. The areas in sort of fainter grey are the areas that will be removed. You can see that. So we've got existing here, proposed here. And then again, existing south elevation. This is the elevation facing towards the yew hedge, and then the proposed elevation. And this is the west, showing facing towards Dagnall House. Again, little change, some alterations to door details, but otherwise pretty much the same. And this is just one of the elevations facing the car park. You can see here that there is some timber cladding proposed to face off the flat-roofed areas where the links have been demolished. Although timber isn't a material we'd usually see in the national park, in these small, discrete locations, we felt that that was appropriate. And then this is the tree constraints plan. I don't know whether you'll be able to read all the detail, but that's not really important. You can see the boundary to Garden 5, which is the area where we were suggesting that there be a stone wall rather than a close bordered fence. You can see the large retained western cedar tree and the yew hedge along the south boundary. So, looking at the principle of the development, policies HC4 and DMS2 require evidence that community facilities are no longer required or viable or are available elsewhere. So this, the home was disposed of by the County Council by way of auction, and they cited drop-in occupancy rates and the fact that the building was no longer fit for purpose, and also that there were other care homes in and around Bakewell. So overall, we are satisfied that the disposal by the County Council was strongly indicative of the home being no longer required, and noting that there were no objections from the Town Council in this respect. With regard to the proposed housing, DMH6 allows for the development of previously developed land in settlements, which this is, provided that subject to viability, an element of the housing addresses affordable local needs. So following the previous refusal for open market housing, the applicants completed a viability appraisal, and that actually said that there was the scheme was not viable to provide any affordables, but the authority requested an independent review of that appraisal, which found in fact the scheme was capable of delivering 2 affordables, and that is what is now being proposed. And we're satisfied that the affordable dwellings would meet the identified need as identified in the Bakewell Housing Needs Survey, and they would be of a size and type that would remain affordable. With regard to design, as I say, little's changed, and we are happy that given the modern origins of the building and the fairly discreet location in the conservation area, that any impacts on the conservation area itself would be largely neutral. Flood risk issues have been satisfactorily addressed, and you'll have read in your report about that, and subject to conditions, the development wouldn't result in harm to protected species. Also, there is sufficient off-street parking to meet the needs of the development. So the main issues that have been raised from the 4 or 5 letters of objection or general comment that we've received are twofold. Firstly, residents feel strongly that the yew hedge on the south boundary should be retained. And secondly, they are raised concerns about the retention of the 2 pedestrian accesses onto the avenue. So, firstly, with regard to the pedestrian accesses, the objectors state that the gates were never in use when the site was a nursing home. But the fact is that if it continued to be used as a nursing home, those gates could be opened up and used at any time by staff or visitors, and actually they would have provided a through route through the site. As proposed in this scheme, the gates would actually only lead to the private gardens of 2 of the dwellings. So, actually can't really see on this drawing. Let me get back. Sorry, it's just clearer on the other one. Sorry, I'm looking at the right one. There we are. Yeah, so the 2 gates, you see this one here would lead to the private garden of this dwelling, and the other one would lead to the private garden of this dwelling. Residents have raised concerns about the additional pedestrian activity through the avenue, but our view is that the potential level of use would not lead to unacceptable harm to residential amenity. Pedestrian activity in front of dwellings is expected and normal in a residential area, and just because the gates have been locked previously doesn't mean that their use would automatically result in unacceptable harm to amenity. There were also concerns raised about visitors or residents parking on the avenue and walking into the site through the gates. I mean, we accept that that could happen, but it's much more likely that and logical that people would use the clear access along Dagnall Gardens, where the allocated parking is and where there is some unrestricted on-street parking available. But in any case, we have to remember that the situation that the residents are concerned about could occur now with the current use, and so we don't consider that that would lead to any intensification in this respect, and certainly not enough to justify a condition to block off the gates. Secondly, the second issue is the representations feel strongly that the yew hedge should be retained because they feel it contributes to the character of the area We reached a compromise here where it would be reduced from the 5 metre height, roughly, that it is now, to about 3 metres, to 3 metres in height over 3 years to ensure that the trees can withstand the pruning, and also to improve the amenity of the proposed dwellings on the south side of the site. We accept that 3 metres is still quite high in fairly close proximity to units 2 and 4, but we don't consider that it would cause such harm to amenity that a refusal on those grounds could be sustained. So in conclusion, in the planning balance, the application is recommended for conditional approval subject to a Section 106 agreement to secure occupancy of the local needs dwellings. There's just a few updates with regard to conditions. So, condition 5, which is the condition with regard to the construction management plan, that is an abbreviation in the recommended conditions for members' benefit. We will be using the full wording for the construction management plan as recommended by the Highway Authority. Condition 8, which is with regard to the yew trees, that again will be a more detailed report that reflects the wording in the arboricultural impact assessment, and we will give some thought to the precision of that wording. Condition 9, we would just like to amend that slightly. So the reason for that is that once the yew trees are cut down to 3 metres, they may be defined as a hedge rather than a tree. So we want to make sure that that is covered by this condition. So we're going to add in to condition 9, no tree or hedge, which is retained or planted. That's at the beginning of the condition, and also the same in the final sentence of the condition as well. Condition 15, we are proposing to delete the final sentence of that condition. The agent raised issues that painting out the casings on the air source heat pumps can cause issue with water retention, and it can invalidate the warranty. On balance, given that the units would be quite discreetly located on the buildings, we can accept the cream colour that's proposed on the submitted spec. So we're proposing to omit that second sentence. And then finally, we would like to add an additional condition to require the new soft landscaping proposals submitted to be carried out in accordance with those details. I think that's it.
Thank you, Andrea, for that presentation. Quite a lot there to digest. We do have 3 speakers today, not 2 that's in your reports. We had a slightly late application from the agent for Gurnon Manor. So we will take that one last. So we've got Judith Twigg, then Hugh Wright, and then David Peck. So I'm going to ask Judith Twigg to come to the to where there's a speaker point and glasses of water. If you want to help yourself to that. Welcome to the meeting, Judith. And you have up to 3 minutes to speak in support of the application in principle, but there's some aspects that you do want to question.
Well, I think the planning application is all right, but my main concern is the gates on the avenue. I've lived on the avenue for 54 years, and I haven't noticed those gates being used, even when Dagnall House was a private house. They never used those gates. But I must say thank you very much to all of you for listening to me and having me. And the gate at the bottom of the avenue is proposed directly into the avenue. Now, what concerns me is who is going to maintain the avenue, because it's a private road, it's unadopted. We have to do our own repairs to the road, and we in the avenue always try to keep the front of our houses clean and the footpaths. But if there is a gate there, are the people who buy the properties going to have to maintain the front of the houses? Because you can't just have it scruffy. And the avenue is a private, unadopted road, and we do all the repairs and everything. And I just cannot understand somebody wanting to come onto a private road, because the thing is, everybody who's on the road lives there, and we all know who's up and down and things, and children play on the road and that sort of thing. And it is so important that, I'm not being snobby or awkward, but it's so important that the residents of the avenue who live on the avenue use the road. And I can't see the point of anybody coming into the avenue, new people. They won't realise when they get there that we all put something in together if the road needs repairing, or the footpaths, or something needs doing. Are the new people, are the people who have the gates on? I'm hoping that if you approve this, which I very, very much hope you won't, that you will make sure that they have to help us all to maintain this unadopted road, because the avenue is so special, and it's probably the only unadopted private road in Bakewell, and everything that we do, we all put together and pay for. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. I'll ask officers to reply after the third speaker. So, can Hugh Wright come to the table, please?
Right, I need to just disconnect myself from the induction loop, because I've got an induction.
Okay. Yep. You've just switched. I think you've just switched yourself off.
Sorry.
Yep.
Right, sorry.
Well,
Right.
welcome to the meeting, Hugh. You've also got up to 3 minutes to
Right,
put
thank
your
you.
case. Thank you.
Right, I'm a neighbouring resident, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this occasion in connection with the planning application for the single-storey care home. There are topics that ought to be addressed prior to its determination. The removal of the 2 pedestrian gates on the southern boundary of the application site to prevent any form of access, vehicle or pedestrian off the avenue. The gates are not required for access to the town centre, shops, schools or public transport as examples. As a reminder, no one accessed the former care home from the avenue, whether being a resident or a visitor. The long-term durability of the timber fence along the avenue. Once failed, no guarantee that it will be reinstated as a secure fence, so that needs to be looked at. The mature yew hedge at the western end of the avenue, not to be reduced to less than 3 metres, is welcome. The proportion of affordable dwellings does not concur with the National Park Authority's or central government's guidance, 40% and 60% respectively. Lack of privacy between Unit 4 and Dagnall House for the habitable rooms is less than 10 metres without adequate screening fence placed in between. The subdivision of buildings to create 6 single aspect facing dwellings has been ill thought and will not be justified as being high quality residential conversion as claimed by the agents. It is the norm for dwellings other than flats to have dual aspects, thus allowing increased natural light, ventilation and views to promote the health and well-being of residents. 2 of the north-facing dwellings will face a car park, which has not been acknowledged by the case planning officer. I strongly disagree with her statement that they will still have a pleasant outlook onto open space and landscaping. The applicant will of course have dug his heels in to justify his layout because he's already started internal work and he will not want to change the layout as he has already started. The drainage consultants have shown proposals to damage or destroy the root protection area for the large western red cedar, which surely cannot be accepted by the committee. The long-term management of common areas, including repairing or renewing of surface finishes, ought to be the subject of a Section 106 agreement. Could the wood belonging to the applicant to the west of the application be included in the same agreement? I know it's outside the application site, but could it be included? All vehicular access ought to be from Dagnall Gardens. The pedestrian access to be either from Dagnall Gardens or Butts Road, with very secure boundaries on the south side with the avenue and the west side facing Dagnall House. This would make the resultant housing development to be totally self-contained from the avenue and Dagnall House. None of the residents from the avenue are against the provision of affordable housing for the application site in order to satisfy the National Park Authority's planning policy, HC1, for new housing. Thank you for visiting the avenue yesterday.
Thank you, Hugh. And lastly, David Peck, who's the agent for this development. Welcome to the meeting, and you two have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair and members of committee, for this opportunity to speak in support of the application. I'm David Peck. I'm a chartered planner and one of the directors of Planning and Design Group. As you've heard, I'm the agent for the application. The scheme before you is a somewhat rare opportunity to provide new homes on a brownfield site close to Bakewell Town Centre, including affordable housing. When I was first asked to advise on this proposal, I was immediately struck by how ideal the site is for individuals and couples who are seeking relatively modest-sized but very well-located homes with easy-to-maintain gardens and in an attractive setting. I'm therefore delighted that your officer has recommended the application for approval. Amendments have been made in response to officer feedback on design details and landscaping, which have also gone at least some way to address concerns raised by local residents. All technical matters have been satisfactorily addressed. As you've heard in the update from the officer, when I read the original recommendation, I did have some concerns regarding a couple of the conditions, and I welcome the officer's acknowledgement that the air source heat pumps do not need to be painted, which would indeed have invalidated any warranty or guarantee. On the matter of the boundary treatment of the front of the site, I remain of the view that a low timber fence, as proposed, would be appropriate, with similar fences being on adjacent properties nearby, and that a stone wall, as suggested in condition 13, is not reasonably necessary. As an alternative, however, I would agree that a low post and rail or picket type fence backed by a hedgerow would be appropriate, and I would ask that consideration be given to amended that condition 13 accordingly, with full details to be agreed in the usual way. The previous scheme that was refused in late 2024 presented a broadly comparable design concept but failed to offer any affordable housing. This application has been submitted by a different party and has addressed the need to provide local needs housing available for rent alongside homes for sale. The applicant is a hands-on builder with local experience, and they're keen to overcome the false start that was the previous application scheme and see the site transformed into 7 high-quality homes, including the 2 affordable houses. I therefore commend the officer's recommendation to you, subject to my requested amendments, and ask that planning permission be granted subject to the Section 106 agreement to cover the affordable housing. And I would be pleased to answer, try to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. If you'd like to go back to your seat. So, Andrea, a number of points were raised by particularly the first 2 speakers, Judith and Hugh, Do you want to respond to those?
Yeah, I'll respond to as best I can to the ones that I've picked out. With regards to the points that Judith Twigg made, repairs and maintenance of the avenue are a private civil matter. They're not a planning matter that we can take into account in reaching a decision on this application. With regard to points that Mr. Wright made, I don't think it's necessarily important that the town centre is not on that side of the avenue. The pedestrians could get access to the recreation ground from there, for example, or could walk into the town centre. There's no reason why additional pedestrian movement along that avenue would cause harm to amenity in our view. The 40 to 60% affordable local needs is not applicable in national parks, so that figure is not right. We don't feel there is a need for the site to be totally self-contained and fenced off from the avenue, as we've said. I think that kind of porosity and ability of people to move in and out of sites in a town environment is perfectly reasonable. With regard to condition 13, if members want to discuss that and were of the view that a native hedgerow would be appropriate, then we would suggest that be backed by a post and wire fence rather than a post and rail fence. I think that's what I can remember.
I remember the root protection for the Western Red Cedar was mentioned by Hugh Wright.
I wonder whether John might be able to answer that question.
Sorry, do you want to say that you are...
apologies, yeah, I'm John Coe, Tree Conservation Officer.
Yeah, it's in relation to the Western Red Cedar, and the fears were expressed that it didn't have sufficient root protection if this development goes ahead.
In the reports that I've seen, sorry, Andrea.
I'm just showing the root protection zone. I'm just showing the area encircled pink and hatched is the root protection zone for that tree. The existing driveway will not be dug up, as far as I'm aware. That will be reused as it is at the moment.
That's right. There's been more than one sort of iteration of the arboriculture report, and following our earlier comments, it's been strengthened, and we're happy that the works that have been described to us, the root protection area shouldn't be compromised in a way that harms the tree. I'm not aware of having specifically seen a new drainage plan, and I thought the arboricultural report referred to that, to them not having seen that yet either. I did make some assumptions based on it being an existing development with existing services and existing drainage.
We can append a condition to that effect to agree any new drainage arrangements to ensure that the root protection zone of the tree is not compromised.
Would that become condition 19?
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing, but that I picked up on was the outlook. That some of the homes having outlooks over car parks. which was raised as a criticism, but
I think that's fairly commonplace in any residential area, to be honest, that some properties will look out over a parking area. I don't think that that is inherently harmful to amenity at all.
okay. So I'll open it up now to members' questions. Ginny.
I would be in favour of a native hedgerow around the garden as a boundary with the post and wire fence, not a picket fence. I acknowledge the fact we've got air source pumps. Is there any opportunity to put solar panels on the roof? And with regards to the roofs, do we have any skylights to improve on the lighting within the rooms which don't have the window access?
I think solar PV panels were considered, but most of the roof slopes actually face east and west, and so it's not optimal really for PV panels. And also we are in the conservation area, so we felt that the air source heat pump was an appropriate form of renewable energy. The other question was about skylights. I mean, that is a possibility, but that's not something that's been proposed. There are a few on the house 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. You can see on those inner roof slopes, there are some roof lights proposed there. And on houses 5 and 6 on the inner roof slopes there. So, yeah. They would improve the lighting levels within the properties to some extent.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm just reiterating the support that Ginny expressed for the hedge as a replacement for the alternative to the dry stone wall. I think, having visited the site, a dry stone wall there would be in isolation and incongruous to the rest of the site. Immediately opposite, there is already a native hedgerow. This would also allow for some mitigation for the removal of the trees to provide additional habitat for hedge nesting birds, which I think would be a positive benefit. I think I'd come back also to the solar PV comment. The modern technology solar PVs will work quite effectively in the east-west direction roof slopes. I have those on my house, and they work very effectively. And those, in conjunction with the air source heat pumps, they would provide the power generation for the air source heat pumps, and therefore would be an environmentally responsible energy generation, whereas the heat source pumps are simply not using, they're electrically powered and therefore not using fossil fuel. So I think that would actually be a very good condition to build into this, particularly in light of the relatively modest slope and the low-lying roofs. Picking up on the comments of some of the speakers, I think we are on questions at the moment. Yeah, okay, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was, I think, yeah.
I'm going to move to Patrick. You can come back in a bit. Yeah.
Chairman, I didn't realise you were dealing with it like that. I've got some comments to make, but no questions.
Okay. From members. Okay, then we will move to comments, and Jim, you can have first, and then we'll go to Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still the new boy, still finding my way around this one. So I think the comments that were raised by the residents of the avenue, some I'm slightly concerned about, some I can fully recognise. I think the idea of pedestrian access from units 4 and 2 would be actually relatively low level and would actually be a very positive benefit in providing additional residents effectively on the avenue, as they would have access to it. And I think that would be a positive thing rather than a negative. I can see that the requirement for screening in there, whether it be by the fence, which is actually quite ugly and is causing the hedge behind it to die, a properly maintained yew hedge on that frontage would actually be very attractive, would enhance the avenue. And so I think that would be a very positive thing, and we should certainly reinforce conditions to ensure that that is maintained, retained. And the other point was the maintenance of the communal areas. I had concern about this yesterday when we were on the site as to how there would be. So some sort of condition probably needs to be imposed for that to ensure that communal areas are maintained for a at least defined period of time, a significantly long defined period of time. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for your patience.
Thank you, Jim. Patrick.
Thank you, thank you, Chairman. Actually, I've just thought of a question. The two exits onto the avenue, do they serve the whole... I think I know the answer to this, but I want to get it absolutely clear. Do they serve the whole site or part of the site, or just the individual houses that front the avenue?
Just the individual gardens of those two properties on the south side.
So I can't read the numbers from here, but so...
It's house two,
two and four.
So houses 1 and 2 couldn't use the access onto the avenue?
Because there is this is one of the accesses here, and that's the other access. And this here is the boundary of the garden of this property, and that there is the boundary of that property. So people from here, couldn't walk through because it would be going across the garden of someone else's property.
Right.
And
first of all, Chairman, I agree with Ginny and others that I think a hedge is adequate for the site on the corner. It's probably safer as well, judging by the way 1 or 2 of the cars drove going past us yesterday. I understand the concerns about the avenue, but actually what we are talking about here is a pedestrian access only for 2 houses, which in terms of the, unless they're pretty lively houses and riotous houses, in terms of their impact on the avenue will be quite minimal. And in terms of their impact on the maintenance of the highway, I would have thought it would have been almost non-existent, because all they're doing is walking on tarmac. There are, I know from experience, complex rules surrounding the maintenance of private streets. And if the thing ever got to the point where, litigation and so forth was involved, the responsibility for maintaining this part of the avenue would depend upon the nature of the access and how it was being used. And I don't believe that would have an awful lot of weight in determining the sort of liability for looking after the road and so on and so forth. I do understand the nervousness that there is when new accesses are opened onto relatively private areas. But they are accesses that are there. They may not have been used for a very long time, but they are there. And actually, if that hadn't been an issue now, if there was no access there now, I don't think we would need planning permission they would need planning permission to put one in later on if we approve this development. I think in that sense our hands are tied. And if there's any issue surrounding the access here, it is about private rights between the owners of the avenue and the owners of this site. And I don't think it's a planning issue. That's my personal opinion here. I find the rest of the development the best that can be achieved out of a set of buildings like this. And as far as I'm concerned, with subject to all those amendments of various planning conditions and so forth, I'm perfectly happy to move this for approval, which I'm doing.
Thank you, Patrick. Rachel, you.
Hello. Yeah, just a comment really on again thinking about the trees, and in the recommendation, in recommendation 10, it talks about the mitigation and compensation enhancement. Obviously, we've not seen that report, but I'd just like to take some comfort in knowing that timings are a consideration in terms of reducing the yew hedge tree height and the removal of the trees, so that the timings are at an appropriate time of year. So I don't know if officers could answer that.
Yeah, there was a question that was raised yesterday for those of us that were able to go on the site visit, and it is over 3 years. But do you want to speak to that, Andrea?
Well, I think in terms of timings, I'm fairly sure that is covered in the arboricultural impact assessment and in the ecological report that was submitted. Yeah, without checking that, I can't be 100% certain. So we could maybe put a condition on to ensure that.
Yeah,
we have our tree officer here.
Yeah, just operations outside of bird nesting season would be appropriate.
Just John.
Jim, do you want to come to the table
and
expand on that?
For nesting birds, it's the responsibility of the tree contractor to avoid nesting birds, and probably for a hedge like that to work outside of the nesting season altogether.
Thank you, John. I thought that would be the case. Jim.
Just happy to second the proposal from Patrick.
That's good to know, and we could proceed to a vote, but I'm just mindful that you asked about solar panels. Were you wanting to put that in as an amendment? And also the other hedge, where if we go to condition 13.
Yeah. To add at the end of that, or native hedgerow backed by a post and wire fence until such a time that the hedgerow is established. If we want to add if members want to add a condition about solar panels, I would suggest that we request the submission and agreement of a sustainability scheme, which includes solar PV panels.
Is that amending an existing condition,
No,
or that would take
would
us
be
to a condition 20?
Yeah.
And can you just... So in addition to the conditions you've got, I'll come to you in a sec, Bill. In addition to the conditions that we've got down here and we've been amending, we've also got a new condition 18 which relates to soft landscaping, and a condition 19 that I didn't make a note of.
Drainage details.
Drainage details.
Oh, yeah.
And then 20 would relate to sustainability and the possibility of solar panels being put on the site. So before we take a vote on it, Bill wants to come in.
Yeah, just a very quick observation. And I think it's a learning point for us, really. In the 1970s, this development was given planning consent by the Peak District National Park Authority. Whilst it was in a conservation area, I gather, I think the conservation area was created before then, probably?
No, 3 years after.
Afterwards, right. Yeah, so it can't, yes, I don't really understand why it included that development. But anyway, in that case, so that's a mystery. But all I was going to say about the planning permission in the 1970s, it was clearly expedient. It was clearly at that time they needed this type of provision, and this was expedient to have it there and expedient to do it in this design. This would never be given permission now. But so that I just say that because there may be schemes coming to us in the future, or coming to the authority in the future, that seem expedient, but we must be mindful of the long-term effects that it could have. So it's the best that can be done with what has been created due to that decision 50 or so years ago. Just a very brief comment on the two pedestrian accesses, which was a bit of an anomaly. One of them seems to go through the property of Dagnall House anyway, which is another issue, but it's, as you say, it's a legal issue. There will be a temptation for people of those two properties, numbers 4 and 2, to possibly drive up to park there rather than park somewhere else, because it's much more convenient. But I guess that's, again, it's a legal issue with the owners of the avenue. But, I can see that being an issue. There's no existing right of vehicle access, but people might be tempted to do that.
That is a possibility, but that could be the case now, and in fact there's probably more likelihood with a nursing home use that you would get visitors or residents parking there. I know they haven't done that in the past, but there's no reason why they couldn't. So I don't think there would be any intensification of that as a result of this development.
Okay, I think we're nearly there. Can I just check with Patrick and Jim that you're happy to propose and second the motion with those additional amendments that have just come in on drainage sustainability and to the hedgerow on which was condition 13. Okay, can I see all those members in favour? Any against? That is carried. Thank you very much for that. I don't think the others are going to go into quite as much detail, so thank you for your forbearance on that one. We're going to ask Mark to take us through the Old Hall at Parwich, which also has another name which I won't go into. Item 7 on your sheets. On your agenda pack.
Just wait for Kath to come back.
Oh, yes, please. Can we get Kath back in?
We will be there. You just should be. Oh, John's going to come out.
Welcome back, Kath. We're going to move to item 7, which is on page 27, and Mark's going to take us through that full application for the erection of a single-storey side and rear extension to Old Hall, which is on Creamery Lane in Parwich.
Thank you, Chair. Can I suggest that we go through, as you can see, it's set up here, items 7 and 8 together. They're both the same proposals, one for planning and one for listed building consent. And I'd recommend that the vote is taken on the listed building consent first, because that otherwise we may prejudice the outcome of the other application.
Okay, members understand that? Thank you.
So the application site is Old Hall in the north of Parwich, located on Creamery Lane. It's a Grade 2 listed building. And this is a closer view of the site. And the area that you can see shaded blue there at the top edge of the building is where the proposed extension is. In terms of orientation, this is the principal elevation here of the house. So this is the front as existing, and as you'd expect for a rear and side extension, it's unaltered by these proposals. The southeast elevation as it exists, which is also unaffected. And this is the rear as existing. So you can see you've got the main body of the house here, and this is a slightly later addition which was added as a stairwell. The report sets out as 1925. That's actually was as advised on a previous application. However, the current heritage assessment does set that out as much earlier, being late 17th or early 18th century. So that has more significance than we'd previously considered. And as proposed, so this is a glazed, predominantly extension to the rear with metal framework and a low stone dwarf wall to the bottom. And as you can see, it extends pretty much across the entirety of this section of the rear elevation, cutting across the corner coins of the building here, and it wraps around the stairwell extension too. and is then this gable here abuts it here. So that's shown aside. So this is the stairwell extension here, and again you can see it's largely glazed to this side as well. It's the existing ground floor plan, and as proposed. So if I just flick between the two there, you can see there's some loss of historic fabric there and some rearrangement of that, little bits of infill as well, to accommodate the circulation. And you can see here the glazed frame where it goes around the existing building. And there's your proposed roof plan, which is again a glazed roof, and that's the roof of the stairwell area. Go through some photographs. So here's the front of the building. It's generally 17th century. And here's the rear. So this is the position the extension would be in. This is a largely private garden. There are some views down towards this from Creamery Lane, albeit those are relatively limited. Just a different angle on that. And looking back towards the stairwell extension from the side of the property. So I'll just leave it on. Perhaps that's the most useful for you. So this application follows the refusal of an applications for extension in essentially the same position, which was a more solid extension, and that was refused by members. This application takes a different form. It's more lightweight in terms of its glazing, but it nonetheless has a significant effect on the rear elevation of the listed building. It cuts across key features, it obscures other ones. The detailing of the building is a large part of its significance in this case, and a lot of that would be either removed or eroded by the extension, and even those where it's retained, the legibility of those would be lost behind the extension. So our view is that it results in less than substantial but significant harm to the heritage significance of the listed building, and for those reasons it is recommended for refusal both for planning and listed building consent. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to say something about the footpath nearby? Well, on a previous occasion, several members here did visit, and we did take in the fact that there was a footpath that runs along the side of the building, and you can see the back of it.
Sorry, Chair. So along this line to the... Sorry, you've got immediately behind you, I appreciate. You mean along the northern edge? Yes, that's right. So there's some views from Creamery Lane, but there are also further views from a right-of-way.
Okay, we have one speaker for this, and that's John Imber, who's the agent for this application. If you'd like to come to the desk where there's a microphone and a jug of water and glasses if you need that. And you have, welcome to the meeting, and you have up to 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. The Old Hall is a traditional creamery converted into residential use in the 1920s. It's very much a product of its time. The kitchen is small and dark and not well suited to modern family life, and there is no ancillary storage or utility room. The applicants propose to extend the kitchen to create a more contemporary space and to bring in more light. The scheme before members today is the fourth evolution of the proposals, with each iteration an attempt to address officers' concerns. The lightweight glazed structure in particular is in response to concerns relating to a previous masonry addition obscuring views of the historic structure. The proposals involve a contemporary addition sensitively sited at the rear of the building. The scheme was informed by the input of a heritage specialist who concluded that it would involve minimal loss of historic fabric, with impacts largely confined to the 1920s alterations, and that the modern design would represent another contextually appropriate phase in the evolution of the building. The proposed extension is sensitively sited where it would not appear prominent from public vantage points, minimising its impact upon the conservation area. The applicant's not aware of the existence of any path alongside the property. The heritage consultant's firm view is that the proposals do not harm the significance of either the listed building or the Parwich Conservation Area. The applicants have considered alternative solutions to creating a larger kitchen to suit modern family life, including internal alterations to extend it into a hallway and dining room. This would have required the removal of the chimney, however, and was abandoned in favour of a more sensitive solution. After lengthy consideration, we're satisfied that proposals before the committee today are the least disruptive to the original fabric. It's clear that the proposals would not unacceptably affect neighbours in terms of loss of light or privacy, and that there are no highway safety implications in this instance. The schemes attracted significant local support from both neighbours and the parish councils. Supporters have praised the modern, lightweight design of the proposed extension and consider it a well-judged response to the constraints of the site, which is sensitive to its historic context. We would therefore encourage members to give weight to the Heritage Consultant's findings and the clear local support and grant planning permission for the proposals so that the applicants can continue to enjoy the property and leave it suitable for generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. If you'd like to go back to your seat, please. Mark, do you want to respond to any of those comments?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll open up to members for questions. Patrick.
Path.
Thank you, Patrick. We're just looking at it now on our mapping portal, and it appears that it is not a public right of way to the rear of that property. There's a public footpath further south, but that's significantly away from the building, and you wouldn't have views of it from that. So any path that members walk to the north of the building is private.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're probably on someone else's private land and had a view of the side of it. Any more questions? Melandra.
If we were to pass this, would this be setting a precedent, or are there plenty of examples of conservatories in the Peak Park attached to listed buildings?
Glazed additions to listed buildings are, in some instances, historic. They glass houses and orangeries, etc., were present on listed buildings locally and otherwise. In this case, it's not an objection to the use of a glazed extension. The previous extension that was refused, as I mentioned, was much more solid and didn't have that, but still raised objection. It is the impact of a combination of the position, the design, and the impact that those have on this particular listed building. So it's each one is on its merits, and just because in officers' view this glazed extension isn't appropriate here, doesn't mean that a glazed extension wouldn't ever be appropriate somewhere else. So there's no risk of precedent here. Our view is just that this is an inappropriate treatment in this case.
Ginny, then Jim.
Can I just check on that point? So is it the principle of putting a glazed area on the building, or is it the design of this particular glazed area that we're against?
It's difficult for me to advise and to categorically say that no glazed extension could be added to this building. Obviously, that's not what's in front of you. What is proposed here, it's the area of the building that it's covering is one of the issues. It covers the entire section of the rear here to 2 stories. So it immediately hides those features. It involves affixing into the historic stonework and across features of the building. It wraps around the stairwell extension, so it further masks the evolution of the building historically, which affects its interpretation. And inevitably, although you can read the building through that glazing to some extent if you're stood very close, reflectivity means that's unlikely, and the building will become domesticated within that space. So it's a combination of factors. if that extension were to be stone with a slate roof, you would have a not too dissimilar report in front of you in terms of the impact on the listed building. So it's not to do with it being glazed per se, it's to do with the extent, form and design.
Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I personally am not objecting to modern materials on listed buildings. I think they can work very, very well. But I think picking up particularly some points of the report from the officers, namely 70, 71, 72, 74 and 75, I think the awkwardness of the planes that was highlighted in terms of the presentation is a serious issue. The loss of the visual simplicity, I think, again, is another key thing in terms of maintaining, as you say, the evolution of the building with the additional stairwell addition, and also the comments regarding the nature of the reflections on glass. So, in light of that, I would actually be happy to propose the recommendation for refusal presented by the officers. Thank you.
Patrick.
Trying to remember from the site visit, the windows that are behind on the first floor, but inside, as it were, the proposed conservatory, on the plans, going back to the elevations, that's one. The upstairs windows behind the glass, as it were. I seem to remember when we went on the site visit, whenever it was, there was an issue about whether those were original to the original listed building or whether they were a 1920s job. Did we ever come to a conclusion as to which that was?
I'm not the case officer on this case, and I don't know the answer to that, but Chris, our conservation officer, is here and he may well have more information.
Yes, I've got a similar memory to you, Patrick, on that. Lee.
Well, can Chris...
Oh, sorry.
Okay, Chris, you want to comment?
Hi, yeah, this on. Hi, yes, I'm Chris Curtis. I'm a Senior Conservation Officer at the Peak District National Park. I can't remember the specific details of the windows on the top floor. Just from looking at it now, it could be either or both. A lot of the windows have quite crisp features that could be a result of the 1925 alterations. They do contribute towards the architectural interest of the building, though. They're very nice windows. What is probably more important to the proposal is the window on the ground floor to the left, which is original to the building. So that's which would be removed as part of the proposals.
Would be removed?
Yes, entirely. Yeah, and that's the 17th century or early 18th century window.
Got a photograph. Do any of the slides show that?
What did you want to see? The
window that was part of the original building that was going to be removed.
It's yes, it's here at ground floor.
Oh, that one there.
Yeah.
And yeah. Well, that doesn't have to be removed, does it?
Okay, I'm going to come on to Lee.
I'm just going to second what Jim said on this. It's I think it's clear it doesn't enhance the building in any shape or form, and losing that 17th century window doesn't seem appropriate at all. So I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you, Lee. Right, we have that motion on the table then with a proposer and seconder. I'm going to suggest we go to a vote on it.
That's on the listed building consent.
And we're going to take it on the listed building consent first. Quite right. So can I see all those in favour of the motion as in your agenda? Yeah, so we've decided, based on the information we have, that we can't accept this application. So unfortunately, you're going to have to get. If you do want some form of extension, clearly some more work will have to be done on that. But we can't accept that proposal as it is today. I'm going to call for a 10-minute comfort break. Can we come back at 11:30, please? Okay, we'll resume the session. Moving on to agenda item 9, full application for proposed garage and store building for the purposes of incidental to a dwelling at the Barn, South Street, Bakewell. And this was the other site that members visited yesterday. And so it's back to Mark to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is off South Church Street in Bakewell. So the access is taken off here, along this sort of the narrow strip you can see, red line there. The principal building on the site is at the west, which is a converted and linked barn. And then over on the east side in the corner here, you can see a small structure there at the moment. That's a timber shed or outbuildings you'll see in the photographs, and the rest of the site is given over to lawn. There are neighbouring properties right next to the house. There's the property to the south, the property to the east here is Erica House, and then you have, or Erica Cottage rather, and Barnes Cottage to the north here. Those are the two most relevant properties. Some members will remember this site from a previous application, which was also for a garage and outbuilding. That was recommended for approval by members, by officers rather, and refused by members on grounds of amenity. And that decision was appealed, and the appeal was dismissed. So this application now seeks to overcome the previous reasons for refusal. So, and these are the current site. So the access, we take this plan here, the access comes in from the north here. Here is the dwelling, and here's the existing shed and outbuilding, and this is a lawned area here. And this shows the relationship to Erica Cottage and Barnes Cottage. I think you can see faintly that this is Erica Cottage just at the side here, and Barnes Cottage behind, and then obviously these photographs look in the other direction, and you can see that's the existing shed elevations at the bottom there. And this is the proposed. So you can see that the shed is outlined there. So the new building is a garage and store, larger than the shed, and it's positioned further south and further west than the existing shed. It has a garage door and a window to the front set under the eaves, and with a pedestrian door in the gable. The rear elevation is east facing, so this is what is facing towards Erica Cottage. And north facing is the gable here, which is facing towards Barnes Cottage. The agent has provided some details on the plans here. The red line that you can see, this is the facing window of Erica Cottage, which you'll see in the photographs as well in a moment. And that is the 25-degree line, below which any building on this side of the site might be expected to impact light reaching that window. And you can see that it's some way outside of that 25-degree line. So to move on to some photographs of the site, here's the existing shed, and this is Erica Cottage. Here you can see it has a dormer to the rear, and this is the window that I was just explaining about there, which faces directly towards the application site, with no screening other than the existing shed. And this is a rear-facing larger opening in that same projection, and this is Barnes Cottage adjacent to the site here. And there's a closer up view of that for you. So again, we have Barnes Cottage here and Erica Cottage behind here. Both of those properties are set at lower levels, which was some of the concern that members had with the proposal last time in terms of the potential overbearing of a structure. And that shows the existing relationship between the boundary. So on the other side of this wall, on Erica Cottage's side, the ground is lower. And that's just showing the parent building looking back into the site, and that's the access into the site. So in this photo, the shed is over here. I'll just go back to the plans, it's probably most helpful. So I do need to make a correction to the report at paragraph 44. it refers twice, in fact, to height, and it should be width. So it reads at the moment, the proposed building would be twice as far from the eastern boundary as that previously refused, would present a lower facing wall. It should say a narrower facing wall, and it should say 6.4 metres wide compared to the previously approved 7.8. So it's just been framed incorrectly there. As I say, this does follow previous proposals. As it came in originally, officers were still of the view that that members took previously and that the inspector upheld, and that was that the building was still likely to be oppressive or overbearing to the neighbouring properties. We've worked with the agent over a number of weeks and months to arrive at a scheme which we consider overcomes those concerns. The scheme has been, the ground floor of the building has been lowered by 30 centimetres, and the roof pitch has been brought down slightly as well. So the whole structure is now overall 60 centimetres lower than it was previously. And perhaps most significantly, it has been moved away from the boundaries of the site. It's now 1.5 metres from the northern boundary, and it's 2 metres from the eastern boundary. In moving it south, it reduces the direct line of sight from Erica Cottage's window. It pulls it further from the boundary of Barnes Cottage, and so it's less overbearing on their amenity space. And obviously, combined with the reduction in height as well, that further reduces the impacts. From a design point of view, it's what we would expect in a site like this. It's stone-built slate roof, and that's considered to be appropriate. Parking within the site and available parking space would be unaffected, and officers are satisfied that the application is approvable in all other regards, and so it's recommended for conditional approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. We have two speakers on this application, and I'm going to take the objector first. That's Mrs. Colebrook. If you'd like to come to the speaker there. Welcome to the meeting. If you press the button where there's a sort of a front of face with shape, that's it, and you have up to 3 minutes to speak.
Yep. So I'm from Erica Cottage. We've submitted an objection letter, to which I hope you've had a chance to consider. The previous application, as you said, was rejected by Bakewell Town Council, the Planning Committee and the Planning Inspectorate. The development proposed seeks to overcome the reasons for refusal. However, the changes made are not real changes, and they don't address the Planning Inspectorate's comments or the suggestions of the committee. The Planning Inspectorate, quote, said that it will have an overbearing impact on Erica and Barnes Cottage, and the proposed development would have an unacceptable effect on the living conditions of the occupiers of the neighbouring properties, with particular reference to outlook. The inspector found the proposal would conflict with the adopted policies, and it would also conflict with the detailed design guide and supplementary planning document. The Planning Committee refused the previous development for its overbearing impact, therefore harming amenity of occupants and neighbouring properties, contrary to GSP 3, DMC3 and DMH7 and the authority's supplementary planning document. The Bakewell Town Council objected previously to the plans and again agreed that the changes made in the current application are not sufficient to overcome concerns previously identified and subsequently object to the proposal. Nothing about the amended plans addresses these issues, and it's a real shame suggestions to rectify made last time by the committee have not been adopted. To highlight some comments in the officer's report, item 39, no distance is given for comparison with Erica Cottage, which is only 4.2 metres. This is overlooked. Item 43, the overbearing impact still needs to be addressed. Item 45 is a subjective statement. Item 46, the first floor west-facing window of Erica Cottage is not in a dormer extension. It's part of the living room space and walls. Item 48, a flat roof option would be better. Bakewell Town Council have suggested this as an option, as well as the committee last time. On drawing 241705, there is a flat roof solution that is suggested to be adopted, but no height or details are given. It's worth noting it's been acknowledged as a potential solution. An example of a garage and store is located on Chantry House on North Church Street. It measures 2.8 metres to the top of the stone parapet and has a flat roof. From the centre height of our living room window on the west elevation, if a parapet wall of similar height to the garage for Chantry House was to be built, and on a reduced ground of 300 millimetres, as is suggested in the revised drawing, its height would only be approximately 300 millimetres above the central line of the window and the existing shed. This would significantly reduce the height and the overbearing impact. Item 49. The existing shed is not relevant at all, especially when its replacement is much larger and entirely different in design. Item 51, again, this is a subjective comment, it's still an impact. And finally, I would like to highlight that ever since the Barns was converted 11 years ago, it's never been a dwelling, but a large holiday let business surrounded by residential dwellings. This development would have negative impacts for those surrounding it, just to house tourist vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Colebrook. If you'd like to go back to your seat. And Nick Marriott, if you'd like to come up. I think you have been here before, so you know the pack drill. It's the 3 minutes you have to speak.
Good morning. As you know, the application has a lengthy history, but the issue before you today is actually quite narrow. The previous proposal was refused because it was considered to cause an overbearing impact and a significant loss of light to neighbouring properties. The refusal was subsequently appealed but dismissed. However, it is important to be precise about what the inspector actually concluded. The inspector found that the previous proposal would not cause a significant loss of light to Erica Cottage or the properties to the north. She also found that it would not unreasonably overshadow neighbouring windows or gardens. There was no harm to the conservation area or to the special qualities of the national park. The appeal was dismissed specifically because the perceived overbearing effect upon the outlook from Erica Cottage and Barnes Cottage. Following that decision, the applicants engaged with the authority via the pre-application process and redesigned the building specifically to address those singular concerns. Compared with the appeal proposal, the building is now 1.4 metres shorter, its finished floor level is 300 millimetres lower, its ridge is 600 mm lower, and it has been moved further away from both neighbouring boundaries. Taken together, those changes directly respond to the points the inspector was concerned about. Nonetheless, there remain numerous and wide-ranging objections to the proposal beyond the inspector's concerns. Members should, of course, consider them carefully. However, I would like to stress that the repetition of an objection does not, in itself, make it material or relevant. Loss of light, overshadowing, privacy and heritage impact were all considered through the appeal process. The inspector found those matters acceptable. In the absence of new evidence or something material, I do not consider it fair or reasonable to simply reopen the debate because they continue to be raised. The officer's report therefore correctly focuses on the remaining issue of outlook and overbearing impact. It concludes that the amendments are sufficient to overcome the harm previously identified and that there would be no significant adverse impact upon either Erica Cottage or Barnes Cottage. So the question for the members is straightforward. Does this materially smaller, lower and more distant building adequately address the inspector's concern about outlook? Your professional officers have assessed that question and have concluded that it does. I respectfully ask members to support the recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Mark, do you want to respond particularly to the first speaker's assertions? She does take a different approach or a different attitude to your interpretation of GSP 3.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think the word subjective was used by the speaker several times, and clearly there is an element of judgment in these types of matters, and that's for members to debate. I don't think I need to respond any further.
Okay, I'll put it out for members' questions. Jim?
Thank you, Chair. Do we actually have any illustrations that will show the previous application and this application we can overlay? As I wasn't here when the previous one application came through, I've got no knowledge of what that looked like. And obviously, similarly with the appeal, I have no previous knowledge of that. But it would be interesting to see the two, because having visited the site, the current proposal, to my mind, still looks very large and very overbearing on the adjacent properties. So if we have that, it would be very useful to see that if we can, please.
We don't have that, and we wouldn't normally introduce a direct comparison like that. I've referred to it in the report, but clearly we need to be looking at this on its own merits. And I'd hope that the details in the report are sufficient that members can understand the changes from what was previously refused. In terms of, and I'm not going to try and draw it onto a screen here because it won't be accurate, but previously this building was 1 metre from this boundary, it's now 2. The height of this ridge was 600 mil higher, and the height of these eaves was 300 mil higher. Now, I appreciate that might not be especially easy to visualise, but it's the distance between that boundary has doubled from 1 to 2 metres. The distance from the the distance from this boundary here has increased from 1 metre to 1.5. So those are the changes. But yeah, I don't have anything to overlay, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Mark. Patrick.
This sounds a bit of a facetious question, but it's not intended to be. I'm sorry. What do we mean by overbearing? What are the tests that we ought to be applying to decide whether something is overbearing or not? It's not an expression which I particularly come across in earlier planning times.
It's certainly one that's used commonly through planning judgments, but it's in terms of the tests, there are no formal tests set out for making that judgment. We have policies in terms generally of separation distances between dwellings and things like that, of course. But if overbearing, we're talking about whether it will have an oppressive impact on a neighbouring property. And that's ultimately going to be a judgment of scale and distance and mass and form. I can't really define it any further than that for you, I don't think.
Bill.
Thank you. This is a tricky one. We've talked about it before, and interestingly, I was here when it was debated and voted against recommendation for approval, which was upheld by the inspector. It becomes a sort of matter of opinion and a sort of bit nuanced, really. I think in these situations we should look at, is there a people, individuals, householders, occupants have a legitimate right to have reasonable extensions or additions that meet specific demands, and in the same way neighbours have legitimate requirements as to what would be, to comment on things that are detrimental. And that is legitimate as well. I have concerns and sympathy for that. Interestingly, the speaker said it's been a holiday let, and presumably when it was granted permission, that was as an open market permission in order to preserve and convert a barn, and as a result could then be used for whatever purpose a residence. So my own view, and I think that's quite an important consideration, because there doesn't seem to be a need. The householder, if it's not a dwelling house, it's a holiday let, hasn't demonstrated a need to have this building, which is interesting two ways. One, is it sustainable just to build things just because it might be quite nice to build them?
I hate to interrupt, but I thought we were still at the question stage, and I'm trying to tease out some questions from.
All right, no, all right. I'll repeat all that later then. No, but
I think you've got a question there about the holiday let. Does this remain a holiday let?
I'll come back as well because need, the matter of need for it is a dwelling house. It might not be being used as one at the moment. But it's, for the purposes of planning, it's a dwelling house. It doesn't have a holiday let restriction in place. So I think that's important. And in terms of need, our policies don't require any demonstration need for householder development. It's people's prerogative to apply, and that doesn't form part of our assessment.
Okay. If no one else wants to come back, did you want to make some further comments, Bill?
Just to finish that point, really, to say that where, it's a balance, isn't it? There's a legitimate need to have this garage because it's needed as part of the property, but the fact it's a holiday let, so is it really required this? And as it is causing some distress and unhappiness amongst neighbours and the town council, who possibly are in a better position to judge it because they've got an overview of what's happening locally. Is this really a necessary development, given that there are disadvantages to it, even though it's an improved scheme, is still very high in relationship to the surrounding property, in terms, particularly the pitched roof makes it even more higher. So I understand improvements have been made, but I think there doesn't seem to be a particularly demonstrated need to do this in this area.
Adam, you want to come in?
Thanks, Bill. I think I just want to step in there because I'm a bit worried. I wouldn't want members to introduce a concern that isn't potentially justifiable. I think the main issue here is whether this building is overbearing and whether it adversely affects the outlook of those two properties. We have narrowed our concerns down to that. I understand what you're saying about is there a need for it, but in our policies and policies throughout the country, it's accepted in principle that householder development is acceptable. We don't require people to tell us why they want an extension or an outbuilding. So we can't be balancing that against the impacts. We really just need to look at the impacts and decide whether we think they're acceptable or not and focus our attention on that, I think. Thank you.
But it doesn't sound like it is it isn't for a householder though, is it?
Well, it's lawful use as a dwelling house, whether that's occupied short-term by holidaymakers or by someone on a permanent basis. That isn't controlled for this property, so that isn't something that we can take into account. Thank you.
On the point of privacy, I have to say I'm struggling to see how the building impacts on privacy, given that the one window that I can see faces towards the substantial property, and by moving the building further towards the lawn, it actually means that there'd be less opportunity for people to go down to the back garden and try and overlook a neighbouring property in any way. I would have thought it gave those two properties, Erica Cottage and the other one with the French windows at the back, they would actually gain in privacy terms. So again, it comes back to whether you see that building as being overbearing, and I'm struggling to see that, given the changes that have been made. Patrick, you want to come in?
Chairman, I think I agree with you, to help you out. We're always approving things. I mean, I've had a great big modern affordable building built sort of next door to me, and it has changed my outlook and all the rest of it very, very considerably. It's probably to some extent affected my amenity, but not to a very great extent now. We get terraced and semi-detached houses where new extensions are put in on one side, and the sun gets blocked out of your garden, and so on and so forth. There are always issues affecting neighbours, and the question that one has to ask oneself is, based upon reasonableness, is this a reasonable proposal, or is it in some way unreasonable? And I'm finding some difficulty in saying that it's an unreasonable proposal. I'd go further, actually. This is actually quite an open and exposed garden in parts. And it would be possible, for example, for the owner to plant a hedge around the edge of it, and that could grow to 10 or 12 foot high, and that would affect amenity as well. You know, the people within their property have certain rights and so on and so forth. I'm finding it difficult to say that this is so objectionable that it justifies refusal. I'm going to move it for approval.
I'll second that, Patrick. Or let Melandra second it as your hand shot up. Yeah, okay. Jim, you wanted to come in?
I did, thank you, Chair. Yeah. So in terms of observations on this now, I'm looking at this in isolation because obviously I haven't seen the previous application. Could you put up the picture which actually shows the current view of the shed in front of the property behind it?
Did you mean the plan or the photograph?
No, the photograph, please. The one that keep going. No, I think that's probably as good as any. So what we're looking at now essentially is taking the location of that building, moving its line to halfway through where the door is, but raising it up by about 50% higher. I think that would be quite a significant obstruction to the view. It's improved. It's very much improved, I think, from where it was originally by moving it out, because the property behind it now with the blue, which is whichever property that one is, has a better view down the side of it, but it would still be very visible. But more so, I think, to the property behind it, which we now see behind it, because both those properties are set down significantly lower. That's going to be a very large and prominent structure, effectively very visible from those sides. I'm unhappy about it. I don't think I'm sufficiently unhappy to go against the proposal, but I think it still represents a significant overbearing aspect in the viewpoints of those two properties.
Okay. Does anyone else want to express a view? If not, we'll move to a vote. Patrick?
If I would like, if my motion does go ahead, that we look at the design of the garage doors, which are horizontal, slatted, and we normally ask for vertical slatted ones, don't we?
Yes, that's right. We normally seek to try and achieve a vertical emphasis, so we could include a condition for vertically bordered or vertically ribbed.
Would that be a condition too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay then. Oh.
Condition 6, we think.
Right. Oh, of course, yes. For some reason it produces blank, I don't know if anyone else gets it, we get blank sheets, don't we? Yeah, turn up. Yeah, so that we got, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So are you happy with that as a with that additional condition on the garage doors to bring them more into line with what we would be approving within the Peak District National Park, I'm putting it to a vote to approve the application as proposed by Patrick and seconded by Melandra. Can I see all those in favour? Can I see those against? And those abstaining? Okay, that application is passed. Thank you all very much. We'll now move on to the last application, and Will Eyre is going to present that, and that's use of the garage for incidental residential use and parking of vehicles at 26 Swift Close in Bradwell. And that's on page 59. Over to you, Will.
Good afternoon. So this is a full application for the use of a garage for incidental residential use and parking of vehicles at 26 Swift Close in Bradwell. And here's the site location. So it is a 2-storey, 3-bedroom terrace property in the Bradwell Springs development. For any members unaware, the Bradwell Springs is a modern brownfield mixed-use development comprised of 55 dwellings and 6 industrial units. Construction started in 2020 and the final houses were delivered in 2023. So the original application was in 2015 and there were subsequent Section 73 permissions which varied the conditions. But all of these permissions had a condition restricting the use of the garage for parking of motor vehicles and for no other purposes unless agreed by the National Park Authority on an application made to it. So here we have the ground floor plan of the dwelling. See, here is the main section of the house. And then here we have an integral garage, which is about 8 metres long. And this is attached to the neighbouring property to this side, the garage of their property. And there is living space above it as well. Okay, so this application seeks permission to use the rear 4 metres of the garage for domestic storage and a utility room. The partition has already been put in, so there is currently a wall separating the first 4 metres to the latter 4 metres. So for a bit of context as well, the property has a 8.2 metre deep garage. And on the next slide you'll see this. 8.2 metre long garage, and then on the driveway is approximately 9.7 metres long, and the width of it is 3.25 metres long as well. So using our parking standards in our development management policies plan, it outlines that a parking space should be 5 metres long by 2.5 metres wide. So with the garage and the driveway, the property currently has space for 3 car parking spaces, 1 within the garage and then 2 on the driveway. Just noting that it is approximately 300 mil too short, but we do acknowledge that for the purpose of most vehicles, a 9.7 metre long driveway should be sufficient to park 2 vehicles. Stay on the slide. So the Peak District National Park, in its development management plan, has parking standards, and it specifies that a 3-bedroom house should have a minimum of 2 car parking spaces and a maximum of 3. So the property currently has the upper limit for the parking standards. A point of contention with this application is that Bradwell has a neighbourhood plan, and within that neighbourhood plan is policy T2. And this policy states the removal of any car parking facilities, both public and private, will be strongly opposed. So as this would essentially cut the garage in half, only allowing 4.2 metres to be used for garaging, we would essentially lose a car parking space. So the parking provision for the property would go from 3 to 2. Clearly this is in conflict with the neighbourhood plan policy T2. However, the National Park in its development management policies plan has DMT8B, which is a residential off-street parking policy. Now this policy states that off-street parking should be protected where there is evidence it would result in traffic circulation issues. So clearly there's a slight conflict between the neighbourhood plan and the development management plan. One says, the neighbourhood plan says no loss of car parking, whereas the development management policies plan says the loss of off-street car parking is acceptable, subject to it not causing issues locally. So when there's a conflict between different parts of the development plan, the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act of 2004 states that where there is conflict, the conflict must be resolved in favour of the latest document to be adopted as part of the development plan. So the neighbourhood plan was made in 2015 while the Development Management Policies Plan was adopted in 2019. So using the legislative position outlined in the Planning and Culture Purchase Act, this conflict for this application should be resolved in accordance with the 2019 Development Management Plan, which states that the loss is acceptable in certain circumstances. So, move on to the next slide. So this is just a quick one to show you the length of the drive and its spatial context, really. So you can see the property would retain sufficient parking for the size of a dwelling, that is 2 car parking spaces for 3 bedrooms. There is no evidence that the loss of 1 car parking space would have a detrimental impact on traffic circulation locally, and therefore its loss is acceptable under policy DMT 8.b, and the application is recommended for approval on this basis. However, I think it's just worth noting that this assessment has been made solely on the merit of this single application. The neighbourhood plan notes traffic issues in Bradwell, and officers are aware of that. Parking is severely constrained in Bradwell. However, we need to acknowledge that this is located in a residential part of Bradwell, off a relatively modern estate, and the development itself has been constructed to very modern parking standards. And we consider that within our assessment. So that's not to say that we would accept the loss of car parking elsewhere across the village or elsewhere across the Bradwell Springs estate. For example, if there was an application seeking to remove a car parking space within the historic core, the Hills area of Bradwell, it's likely that officers would not take a similar position with regard to the loss of that car parking provision. So the application is recommended for approval on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. We have 2 speakers, Paul Downing and Linda Granger.
I think she's just attending but not speaking.
Okay, no speak. You're here. You're here to observe. Thank you. So, Paul, would you like to come to the microphone? If you want some water, there's glasses and water there. You have up to 3 minutes to speak. Okay. Yes, this is being recorded. Put your microphone on. There's a little but. That's it. You've done it.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about the planning application. My name is Paul Downing, and I'm Chair of Bradwell Parish Council, and we object to this application. Let me begin by saying that back in 2013, and some of the things I'll say have just been explained, but I'm going to repeat some of them. Back in 2013, a group of Bradwell councillors devoted a large amount of their time working with residents and the Peak Park to develop a neighbourhood plan for the parish. I'm joined today by Councillor Granger, who worked on the plan with us, and with help and advice from Peak Park, the plan was made in 2015. One of the key issues we identified in our research for the plan was grossly inadequate parking availability in the village, a situation which is rapidly getting worse as more and much larger vehicles arrive. To address this problem, we established in the plan a policy, T2, intended to ensure garages are used as garages and to make it difficult to convert a garage to any other use. PDMPA recognised this policy and apparently agreed with our concerns when considering the planning application for Bradwell Springs where this property sits. Condition 44 of the PDMPA planning approval 08150779 states that garages and parking spaces must remain so. I remember a conversation with John Keeley at the time about the need to make sure this condition was enforced, and we can therefore surmise that at the time of the planning approval, PDMPA agreed with and supported our policy. We would ask, therefore, what has changed in intervening years? Although not directly relevant to this application, there was also a covenant in the sales contracts for these properties which required them to be sold as family homes and not businesses. Yet at least 3 of the 43 houses are now holiday lets, businesses for want of a better term. In order to attract more business, the owners want to convert their garage into additional living space, such as a games room. The business attracts non-residents who arrive in unspecified numbers and in unpredictable numbers of vehicles. referring to the statement in your recommendation for approval that the available space outside the garage is only 0.3 metres short of that needed to allow for the parking of 2 cars, you imply that it's only a bit short, so should be allowed. We absolutely disagree for 2 reasons. Firstly, our policy should be rigidly enforced, otherwise we feel there's little point in having it. Secondly, because this is now an unpredictable business situation, with unpredictable numbers of vehicles, it is not a normal domestic family environment. It should be stressed that the last time I spoke to a planning meeting was in 2014, so we only come to speak to you when we feel something is really important for our village. In summary, we object to this application. We have a policy on garage conversions for a very important reason. You supported that policy when allowing application 08150779 for Bradwell Springs, and we feel you should not treat a business in the same way as a domestic dwelling. We ask you to accept that local knowledge and understanding of the local situation should have more weight when considering these matters. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Paul. Will, do you want to respond to some to those comments?
Yes. With regard to condition 44, yes, that was present on all the original application and all the subsequent Section 73 applications. However, the condition did also include a sentence at the end which did give scope for the garages to be used for alternative purposes if agreement was sought with the National Park Authority on an application made to it. So that's the circumstance we find ourselves here. And then with regard to the neighbourhood plan policy, yes, ordinarily that is part of the development plan and is a significant material planning consideration when looking at applications within the Bradwell area. However, as I mentioned in my presentation, that plan did predate our more recent development management plan, and we're required to look at the more recently adopted policy document in our assessments when conflict arises between the two. So whilst we acknowledge the policy and we acknowledge the constraints in Bradwell for parking, we can't use that policy just as a reason in of itself to refuse the application. And then when looking at the wider issues, we don't feel that the parking implications in Bradwell Springs in particular are such that the application should be refused.
Can you address the matter about this? Is this property being used as a holiday let?
Well, regardless of how it's being used, it's still a dwelling house. We don't make any distinction between parking provision for a house which has been used for a dwelling or a holiday let. Yep.
I think it was mentioned that property is a business because it's being used as a holiday let, and I'm not aware of the deeds, but if there's anything in the deeds about how you can use those properties, that's not a planning matter, so that's not for us to consider. In terms of planning, it is still a dwelling house, whether, as I said this last time, it is still a dwelling house, whether it is occupied by people on a short-term holiday basis or as a permanent home. This being a market dwelling, there is no control of that. So this is why we say when members are considering market houses that, you know, you have to accept that they can be occupied in any number of ways, provided it stays in the use as a dwelling house. So the policy implications for this in terms of parking requirements are the same. This dwelling could, within its lifetime, switch between holiday occupation and permanent dwelling many times, and we don't have control over that. So we have to consider this application on its merits. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Jim, your hand went up.
Thank you, Chair. I'll limit this to initially to specific questions. So, you've said in your presentation that this has already been partitioned off. Therefore, are we considering this to be a retrospective application, if they're asking to do that? And if it's not being dealt with that way, is any enforcement action being taken on the work that's been done without permission? First question. Second question, we talk about parking spaces. The definition of a parking space is 5 metres by 2.5 metres. That's an absolute. Yes? So therefore, in terms of the nature, the number of parking spaces on the drive of this property, at 9.2 7 metres. That is 1.9 parking spaces, not 2. Is that correct? And then finally, a question of clarification. We have two competing policies here, the neighbourhood plan policy and the development management plan policy. The neighbourhood plan has obviously been created by the town council. Who created the development management plan? Was that town, district, county? And therefore, who's responsible for that to create competing policies? Those are my questions. I'll come to comments later.
Okay, yes, so the partition's been put in. I'm not sure whether the use has commenced as a utility room. The partition itself isn't development, so it may be retrospective, it may not be. With regard to enforcement, obviously I wouldn't want to comment, particularly as it's at planning committee now, so we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. And then for the parking standards, yes, you're right. Ordinarily, yes, 5 metres should be the desired standard. However, we do acknowledge that if there's a shortfall, could two cars park on that driveway, being 30 centimetres too short? And I think the answer is in most instances yes, they would be able to. Oh, sorry, and the development management plan is a national park authority. It's part of the local plan.
So you could get 2 Vauxhall Corsas on the driveway, but not 2 SUVs then?
Thank you, Chair. My question is in relation to the sizing. So if you take the building that's called a garage, the size that's going to be left under garage is going to be 4.2 metres, which is not within the specification of needing 5 metres. So why would you put in a plan where you're giving more space to what is in effect going to be a utility room? Because if you're going to call that space a garage, it's got to be 5 metres, and you've got to make the utility room smaller.
Yes, I suppose so, but also it could be used to park motorbikes, trailers, other vehicles which are smaller. So I think, obviously we're not considering it to be a car parking space, but it could still be used for the parking of vehicles. And yes, we did discuss the reduction in size for the utility room. Clearly making it smaller and getting a full car parking space would have been a better outcome. But the applicant, with respect to it already being in, wanted to test this application on the basis of its current size, so was unwilling to reduce it.
Martin.
Under current parking policies, it is that there should be no more than 2 spaces in front of each other. That means that surely that there are only 2 places on this site originally. The other one is there any likelihood of 2 cars parking on the driveway, overlapping the footpath and restricting the footpath?
So with regard to first question, this plan of permission actually predated the current parking standards, so I'm not sure whether the consideration of 3 in a row was given at the point of plan of permission being granted. And then yes, theoretically there could be 2 very large vehicles blocking the footpath. Equally, if there were 2 large vehicles serving that property, they may not want to use the garage anyway. The length of the driveway is short of it, and if they wanted to park outside, the situation would not really change if there were 2 very large vehicles.
Patrick.
I'm a bit alarmed about this, actually. We entered into the Bradwell local plan with probably the one clear policy that came out of the plan that was something that was going to make a difference was this particular policy. And I don't remember it's not been tested very often, but I don't ever remember it being suggested before that the approval of the development management policies, which came later, would in some way or could in some way undermine the original purpose. Now, the original purpose, I'm going to assume, but I mean, somebody might correct me on this, the original purpose was to keep vehicles off the road in Bradwell because they were fed up with the problems of moving around Bradwell, the environmental problems, the visual problems, and so on and so forth. And the purpose of the policy was clear. And if you start looking at this in terms of the purpose of the policy, it seems to me that this will not help achieve it. There are a lot of questions to be asked, I think, about our own local plan that's out to consultation at the moment, but we'll come back to that. But, I mean, all it needs is a camper van, which is a motor vehicle within the terms of the condition that's on page 60 of the report. All it wants is a camper van, and any other motor vehicle in association with this house is going to be parked on the road. And all because the design of the utility room is such that somebody has put it there and it's however many feet, inches, or whatever you measure these things in, too long to accommodate the second vehicle. It must be right. The basic approach being taken by Bradwell Parish Council must be right. And actually, when we come on to look at things like our design guides, and actually when we start to, if we ever get time to comment on the existing local plan, I think we need to find some way of reinforcing what Bradwell are trying to do, because it's a common problem throughout all the old villages in the national park. I mean, my own village was always bad enough, but now we've got about 4 or 5 large Bedford vans parked in the village. You can't get out of the side lanes safely, and the Derbyshire County Council, as usual, will do nothing about it. There are problems with all of this on-road parking, which actually spoils the national park for those people who want to go and visit it, never mind the people that actually live there. And I think what Bradwell are trying to do here is an important thing, and I don't think this achieves their objective. I don't feel at all comfortable with this. I think to say that this is all substandard in terms of length and you can fit a couple of little vehicles there isn't an answer. It really isn't an answer. I think the policy, we need to find some way of upholding the policy. But I do think we need to find some way, after this meeting is over, of getting that policy back onto a straight pair of railway lines in terms of the whole of the national park. Because what they're trying to achieve here is something which needs to be achieved everywhere.
You want to respond, Brian?
Thanks, Chair. Just trying to make sense of a few things within that. One is the relationship between the neighbourhood plan and the development plan. Actually, the neighbourhood plan forms part of the development plan for the national park. Firstly, I should just say, just for reassurance sake, we did pick this up very specifically. I picked it up because I was aware of the creation and the intent of the plan at the time. I'm interested in neighbourhood planning. It's kind of part of my background, so we kind of looked at what was coming through neighbourhood plans. And the point is that they are meant to be different, going further, adding something spatially distinctive, responding to particular issues. There is a fact that the guidance from national policy does make the point that Will said about relative weight and age and where there might be conflict. So I guess is there a conflict? There's a different kind of set of words as a starting point. But I would still say the terms of T2 in the Bradwell Plan are still relevant. there's still a spatially significant point to be made about the issues in Bradwell, and I don't think they automatically fall away. Even if you start from the point of the current development plan, it's still a very strong material issue. It's an adopted policy that says something very specific. So I want that to just be clear. We've made a judgment on this based on the fact that this was a redeveloped site that had modern parking standards and addressed some local issues. I've got a kind of question in my mind that hasn't really come through the case. You know, what's the likelihood of any knock-on, say if there was a nudging into the roadway, does that cause issues in the wider Bradwell area? Does it add, it might be a very localised problem, but that might still be part of the issue you're talking about. So I think they are real issues, and there is a real policy point there to be made. So I think there's still space for you as members to actually consider all of those things. You know, we're not ignoring the Bradwell neighbourhood plan here. It is actually still relevant, but we've got a different starting point, and we've judged that against modern parking standards. So I just wanted to just make sure that you didn't feel you couldn't take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I've got Jim, then Bill, then Martin.
Thank you, Chair. So commenting on the responses that we've had, as you know from the last meeting, I have a distinct dissatisfaction with retrospective planning applications. It's very simple to get pre-application advice in order to put in an application that complies with everything that we want in advance. So I'm very unhappy with that. In terms of the ownership of the different plans, if the neighbourhood plan is in fact incorporated into the development management plan, then therefore they're effectively contemporary, and therefore precedence, I think, goes with either or. And my personal view is that, well, but it's covered by it, so is it incorporated into it or is it not?
Part of the development plan overall, but you should start from the
Okay,
today policies.
Okay, fine, finally. And the third point I'd make is we can debate how many cars you can fit on that driveway or in that garage. Within the cars in my household, I could probably get 4 on that, including one in the garage. However, it's a binary thing. It either is or it isn't 5 metres. And therefore, on the basis of that, the driveway does not have 2 parking spaces, and therefore I would propose to refuse the application on that basis, send it away, have it rethought, particularly in the context of modifying the interior to retain a parking space within the structure of the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Bill.
Yes, observation. I listened to what Patrick said. He makes a lot of sense. This is what Bradwell wanted, and they wanted these parking spaces for very good reasons. And I agree with what previous speakers have said. There clearly isn't 3 parking spaces here at the moment. There's probably 2, and we're going to be left with 1 effectively. And what Martin said is something I've observed a lot, the problems of cars overhanging the pavement. If you're going to have a pavement and not a shared pedestrian vehicle thing, if you're going to have a pavement, then people expect to use the pavement with prams and pushchairs and, you know, mobility. And people with reduced mobility, they don't want to be dodging cars hanging over the pavement. So there is quite a few issues here. So I would be tended to favour refusing this.
Is that a proposal, Bill? Is that a proposal? Right, so we've got a proposal. So we've got a proposal on the table to refuse the application, and Ginny is seconding that. Thank you. But
If I may, my closing comment was I would propose...
Same proposal.
Yeah, my proposal was refusal on the grounds of that there aren't actually 2 spaces.
Okay.
Conclude that the loss of the parking space is going to cause an adverse issue here for this particular location. Can we just rehearse that evidence? please.
There will not be 2 parking spaces. The requirement is that there are 2 parking spaces. There's 1.9. That's not 2. Therefore, it's a binary decision. Either it is or it isn't 2. It's not 2. Therefore, it's against the policy that we have of minimum 2 parking spaces.
I just want to sort of come off the back of what Angela's asking. We're talking about 0.3 metres in the difference, which I appreciate members are entitled to make a judgment on this, but I'm just saying that it's really important that members think about what will the impact of that be on this area of Bradwell, because just simply saying it's technically not 2 parking spaces, if this goes to appeal, my view is that officers would find that very difficult to defend unless there is some harm that we can point to and saying, here's what the issue is, this is why this decision was made, rather than just simply saying it's 9.7 and not 10, and therefore that's not acceptable.
Right.
Yes, would members need to refer to the traffic circulation perhaps and things like that?
If I may, Chair, I think there are 2 points to it. One is that it's in conflict with the neighbourhood plan policy in terms of no changes, so that's one thing. It isn't 2, it's not nearly 2, it isn't 2. Therefore, it's not an interpretation within the lines. There are a number of local authorities, I think Derbyshire is one of them, where there are restrictions on public car parks to vehicles no more than 5 metres because of the dimensions of parking spaces. So it's a very clear reason for this. I could give chapter and verse on vehicles that are longer than 5 metres, and therefore you wouldn't get 2 on there. If you had 2 vehicles on there, it would overhang the pavement. That would be an obstruction. Therefore, is the potential that this would present an obstruction. It doesn't comply with the requirement for minimum 2 parking spaces because there isn't enough space on the drive and there isn't enough space in the garage by the definitions that we have put forward as minimum 5 metres. And thirdly, as I say, it's in contravention of the neighbourhood plan policy. And by preference, I would tend to give weight to the locally developed neighbourhood plan rather than necessarily the broader Peak Park, but that's just personal interpretation.
Okay, I just need to clarify for members that as a matter of law, section 36(5) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 does say that you have to give precedence to the development management plan as opposed to the neighbourhood, so that can't be a reason.
We've got 3 people wanting to speak at this point. I would just ask that they make additional contributions rather than go over the same ground. But Martin,
right,
you're next.
I am concerned about the effect of allowing this proposal with parking elsewhere in Bradwell. The neighbourhood. I should declare that I am the Vice Chair of a neighbouring parish council, and we have been involved with discussions with Derbyshire County Council with both villages over access, particularly lorry access, and also any form of vehicle access. There are proposals from Derbyshire County Council to modify the signage to try to direct traffic in more appropriate ways. Granted, this doesn't affect Bradwell Springs because Bradwell Springs is a enclosed modern development, but should the policy T2 be overwritten, it could affect other parts of Bradwell.
Rachel. Ginny, did your hand go up to say something?
No,
or it was just a second.
It was a clarification on a point that Jim brought up, which was fine, it was clarified.
Okay, so we have
proposer and a seconder to. So you've got a proposer and a seconder to refuse the application in its entirety
Yeah.
for the reasons that have been explained. So we
Yeah.
go with that.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
take the
Can I see all those in favour of refusing the application?
Okay.
Those against? Abstentions? Just one against. Okay, this time this application is refused. Okay. Thank you all very much. All we have left is the Planning Appeals Monthly Report, page 67. And that's over to Brian.
Just bear with me, Chair. Sorry, yeah. So we continued a run of appeal decisions going in favour of the National Park Authority. So 3 dismissed appeals here, all quite different, quite interesting issues raising. The first one involved sort of protection of holiday occupancy conditions on a caravan site at Newhaven. So the inspector basically backing up our view that without those they could become permanently occupied dwellings in effect, which clearly isn't the intent of holidaying and giving more people the chance to actually come and enjoy the national park. So that was very good, good decision there. The second one is an appeal against a lawful development certificate, and there's some slightly different issues that come to bear with that. The onus of providing relevant facts rests with the appellant, who needs evidence to help with the balance of probabilities on what the impacts would be. But there's issues there about whether it's classed as a caravan rather than something that's again more permanently occupied and structured. And the evidence to us was that it wasn't just incidental as a caravan use, but it was being used more permanently. So that went in our favour as well. So in effect the inspector refuses to grant the certificate of lawful use in that case. The third one was a number of structures to the east of Owler Bar, and there was a number of different grounds for appeal attempted through this one. One was a feeling that it should be permitted development, but it wasn't because they hadn't gone through a prior approval route. Secondly, that the building was substantially complete and therefore it was actually in place for a length of time, but there was evidence to show that it hadn't been substantially completed, so actually there wasn't evidence to show that it had been there for that period of time. And the third one just on landscape impact, which fell as well, so it lost on the 3 grounds and went our way as a result. And this last one here, which was, members might remember Keeper's Cottage in the Lime Park vicinity, actually in the Lime Park conservation area and really in the setting of the Lime Park estate as a registered parking garden. So quite interesting debate there about whether the building itself was a non-designated heritage asset, and because of the condition of the building, the inspector actually considered it wasn't in this case, but actually still did feel it was a building of character, and in that setting use words which I've put in bold there. The proposed replacement in effect would replace a building that appears humble, quaint and subordinate to its surroundings with one that draws attention to itself as a substantial modern executive style dwelling. So actually those are issues of character and impact within that setting still. So still backed up a lot of our core policies in that case. So all quite different but raising interesting issues for us, all supported. Thank you.
Yeah, let the officers on those. Those are all quite difficult appeals, Chairman. I know a little bit about them all, but we've done very well with those, I think.
I agree completely. It's very, very pleasing, particularly with the ones where we've actually been to visit, like Lime Park. But yes, can we make sure that's properly minuted and passed on to the officers who took those appeals through to the inspector? Does anyone else want to comment? In that case, can we note the report? And lots of hands going up. Yeah, I think that's pretty unanimous. Thank you all very much for your patience. That's another one we've got through. And thank you all for your contributions.